And hello, welcome back. This time we're going to go over my latest little update to this game I made. So, as you can see, I've updated the colors a bit so that they're not so jarring to my eyes. And then I also added a bit more arrow action here. And the reason for that is because I needed arrows to point to the diagonal cells on the map. Then eventually I'm going to have moving up and down to like another map, but that's what that's for. And maybe that's what this is for too, to go down. So as you go through the map you're going right, left, up, down, and diagonals. And then if, for instance, maybe there's a hole you want to go down, I'd like to have another cell below it that brings you to that next level and describes that world for you. So my updates to the pawn look like this. So as you can see, I've added a whole new list of diagonals, and I somewhat eyed it to get it to be in the right position, and they seem to work. But I also have something that you don't see, and that's these indicator shapes. They look like cones, so I'll just take one of these and let's see, where is the visible hit? There we go. So when it's visible, it looks like that. So from above, it'll look like basically an arrow, right? And there's one for each lateral direction. By default, we want them to be off. So then my next challenge was to actually take controls from the player to go in the right direction. Now, in the last video I had that working just like immediately when you hit the direction, it just took you in that direction. However, what I found is that when implementing the diagonals, it was very hard because there's no notion in Unreal of putting like multiple keybinds at the same time. So you can only like keybind one thing to one thing. So in this example, in the previous example, I put everything in as a action mapping, and so I had like a north key, a south key, a west key, a north key, and then I had to think like, okay, so in what way can I use those existing events to create new events for going northwest or northeast, for instance. And I had just a hell of a time doing that. And here's an example of just trying to take care of north, northeast, and northwest. As you can see, it's very reminiscent of a certain meme about conspiracies. I had to see if west would, like, this is all just for like the north key binding. So on north I needed to see if west was pressed or east was pressed. And if they're both being pressed, well that's a no-go, so we got to take that down and just reset if it's other way around. And this did work, but only if you hit the keys just so slightly in the right way. And I thought, you know, that there's got to be a better way. So I slept on this, tried to just think about, you know, what are different ways of doing this. I had a crazy dream that had nothing to do with this. And then I just came back and thought, like, what about these axis mappings? So as you can see here, I just said north, southeast, and west, and I set a scale for a direction on like an XY plot. So 1 being up, north, and X negative being down, positive being right, and negative being left. So I had an XY axis being set here, and I also assigned it to the gamepad. And then my thought was actually as well to, you know, maybe the idea is you point in a direction and then you press the interact button to actually go in that direction. And I thought that made a lot of sense because as you're going through this world, you want to be very intentional about where you're going. Like, what if this right tile is lava and you don't want to accidentally go there? You want to go instead to the cool mountain breeze area over here. I don't know. We'll get to the world building eventually here soon, but it did make sense that the control over which tile you go to has to be very intentional, and you don't want to make a mistake on accident. So pick a direction and then confirm it by hitting the interact button made a lot of sense to me. So what I ended up doing was coming down here and setting an axis path, and whenever you set up an axis event, it just continuously sends an axis value out from that event. So these are all just continuously sending, and so I figured I'd just take all those inputs, throw it into a function that I made, and as you can see, this is like way cleaner than the jumbled mess I had before. But what I do is I take all the axes, and then I just take the x-axis, essentially. I add them together because I didn't want it to go anywhere if you had north and south pressed, and since they're negative and positive, they would just cancel out and create a dead zone. And I figured that would be the nicest way to handle that. Same thing with east and west for the y-axis. Or maybe I got that reversed. This is y and this is x. And then I set these variables accordingly. So if you press north, it'll put a 1 in the y-axis. And if you press east, it'll put a 1 in the x-axis. And then I use combinations of these to determine whether or not you're in the dead zone, if they're both 0, northeast, northwest, because anything greater than 0 is going to be where you want to go, essentially. And then after I go through all these conditions, if any of these are true, I either hide them all, and this looks like this. So to hide all of them, I created a dictionary of direction indicators. So I used my enumeration for cell connections to be keys for all the indicator values here. And this is one of the first times I effectively used a dictionary. So whenever I start to play, I set a new value that is that structure. I get all the references to the indicators and I set them to the correlating key that they are associated with. And that allowed me to just easily get to a key if I need to, or if I need to loop through all of them to get all the values, just throw them in there. And then for each loop I just target them and make sure the new visibility is off. And that goes through and hides them all. So that does that, and I set the current direction to none. This current direction is a variable that is another, just what the current connection is based on the cell enumeration for cell connections. Again, using that enumeration is super handy. And as I go through, I set the current value to what it should be. And that's all this does. So as I go through and hit these buttons, this one variable gets changed, and then the state of each direction is also updated. So this is another function I created. It goes through each of the values, makes sure they're invisible. I could probably just reuse the hide all here, right here actually. And then when I set visibility, I just make sure that we find the correct one that's set. So like if you set a certain cell direction, you want to find that inside the dictionary. You want to grab the value, which is one of these indicators, and we set it to visible. So everything hides, and then we only show one at a time. And that's what all these do. So as we go through that. And what's interesting is that all these functions I made were available while I was doing this crazy stuff on the left here to make that a little bit more easier, but it actually ended up being super nice for this functionality. So now that this is setting what we need to set, I used to have 8 or more directions here, like just all separate choose next cell calls into here. But now that I have a current direction that holds that value, and this was already listening to a direction component, I could just do that kind of stuff I was doing before, and then setting the current cell accordingly based on the values we need and all that. So that was wonderful. I was able to take that, put it into the same timeline I had before, and then update the pawn location exactly like I did before. I didn't have to touch this. And bam, whenever I hit the interact, whatever is currently the current direction being selected, it'll take you, animate to the next one, and it's hunky-dory. So as you can see, north, south, east, west, diagonals, diagonals. And then if I pick a direction and hit the interact button, it takes me there. Very intentionally. And if there's nothing there, since the hit test doesn't return anything, it doesn't move. So it automatically just keeps you where you need to be within the grid. Oh no, there's lava over there. I better go up this way and get around it. And as you can see here, I also have my gamepad, since it's bound to the same thing, and I can use my gamepad for the same type of movement. So I'm very happy with how this turned out. Axis mappings turned out to be a lot more useful than I expected for button combos that I was hoping for, so very happy. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.